foundations upon which the details of energy herein do arise creates an entirely new element of risk beyond what even exists today. Given the failure of all sense in the university, or more simply an intellectual grasp of anything called the sanctity of life itself has failed, as is proven by gambling with our entire world, nature, every living thing as is being done across this earth. So we move beyond what is constructively safe, because you have failed everything else, and review the terrorists at CERN, a particle accelerator buried in a mountain now operating. Their stated purpose: to recreate and study the energies responsible for the Big Bang, the single most destructive event in the history of the universe, right here on Earth. It is a gamble with this entire planet that is complex but understandable if you try. I begin with the clear warning, beyond even this description, that playing with energies that are not held back by time, the foundation which completes and controls the realities of physical law, for every action there will be a reaction. Once again, as in the realities of a 10 million degree fire, the release of energies beyond the physical limits of physical law to contain them is the foreplay of an earth going bang, being burned, etc. This is not a game. The terrorists playing with our earth are merely toddlers or fools, if you don't like the word devils, insisting that they are or can play God. To separate the various terrorist groups into their distinctive realities, we must accept the risk that comes with any gain of knowledge that would become a path to even life-ending destruction, as that is what these creatures of doom, this pandemic of horrific arrogance, so blatant and diseased our world itself is in jeopardy. Every life is at risk. Therefore they must be stopped, and all opportunity to be blind, deaf, dumb, and absolutely stupid has gone away. That includes you. We must all accept some risk, some potentiality. That begins with the very limited and near nothing definitions that divide our physical energies here on Earth and beyond. Or more simply, heat, fire, and explosion are three distinct realities, each with their own description, truth, and law. They are not the same, even though they share some characteristics with each other, which is why we are still alive as a planet. Heat is movement controlled in time. Fire is anchored in and won't let go. Explosion is movement without control, established by the release of boundaries. Just as you recognize on this earth in other ways that heat, fire, and explosions are not the same, it is true as well in the various Satan-filled experiments used to terrorize this planet with the possibility they went too far and now we are all dead because of these few. It's not a game. The element assertion of all intellectual horrors is wait and see, how else will we learn? But the reality of playing with life or death for our entire world means wrong is a dead world. Thereby, wait and see is the purpose of death, and the reality of lies so grievous it is Satan so-called, a human arrogance so extreme nothing matters, not even every life on earth. That's just pathetic. This world dies only once. There is no going back. Wrong is a dead earth, because that is what you chose to let these terrorists do without even considering the truth, because that is who you are as well, while the religious say, we will just go to heaven. Reality will prove, having failed to protect life in any possible way, having refused to do even the smallest thing for the sake of all life on earth, having despised and disrespected an entire creation of life and thereby its creator, your eternity is not what you expect. How could that not be so? Gave a penny? Well, it doesn't matter. So that brings us to our current reality. I suppose you shouldn't believe everything you hear. 10 trillion degree measured heat at CERN, from crashing the force of 2 or more nuclear power plants into each other at the speed of light squared. And our main topic of discussion on these sites, because everybody understands what fire is, or the people at the National Ignition Facility and other places deliberately trying to bring that same fire as on the earth here. You believe them after all. They are your gods, therefore you do expect them to create this fire here on earth. That is not up for discussion, it is a fact. Paid for with endless delusion and counterfeit money formed from the illusion of credit belonging to the USA. So then it's just a matter of time. Is that not so? What is not a matter of time or debate as well is that if the 10 million degree fire does not extinguish itself, then the whole world ignites on fire just like the sun. Same fire, same result, who can doubt? This is in fact very true and without debate. If the fire does not extinguish itself, the earth becomes the sun. Therefore they do gamble with every life, and even the planet and the solar system as well. Not a game, no going back, no putting the fire out, no second time for anything but hell. Nonetheless, the most arrogant and insane reality of our time at this moment are the terrorists using counterfeit money to create their toys so they can in fact end life on Earth. How great you are too, letting them. And lest we forget the terrorists mutilating all of nature itself, as nature is the DNA construction of bodies and life. Hell, what could go wrong with that? So on and so on and so on. Anyway, we must try to save this planet, thereby constructing the basic framework of fools, a reality warning. This ain't no game. This is in direct opposition to all things CERN. Their reality at CERN is an environment of extreme atomic destabilization, coupled to an electron mass so extensive that it can allow a completely different state of energy suspended outside of time. That state constructs an anchorage, establishing an ocean of semi-freed electrons searching for an anchorage. It is functionally reshaping the existence of time in a nuclear environment. This will retain its connection here, even though they have been pushed to the limit away from a contained nuclear environment by magnetic force applied. The electrons exist in a state of spin that does construct a magnetic string searching for an anchorage. Forcing that magnetic string outward increases the effect of a tornado spiral. The alternate forces between a spinning atomic nucleus and a separate but contained spinning electrons create. These actions create a defined reaction controlled by the spin environment, or the boundaries that protect nuclear arrangements. An escaped energy controlled by the consequences of an entanglement generated by trillions of volts, construct forces of what is outside the laws applied by light. Or more simply, CERN accelerates and separates nuclear environments to the speed of light and then causes two separate railroad lines to cross, demanding a train wreck of nuclear parts and pieces shall occur. It is this big boy's fool toy. Ain't we grand? It went boom. That's all they do. They learn nothing. In place of a toy, however, even just one initiating impact in these experiments that then allows the escape of protons beyond the speed of light creates consequences in time by this experiment, which can then multiply and influence changes, opening the door with that explosion for every other proton behind it to go through that energy pushed by the explosions created in their experiments, which then causes the release of that program from a controlled atomic environment to become the impetus of a force, using that explosive energy to push atomic particles beyond the state of fundamental action or reaction. This results in growing a force consisting of a mountain of electrons by the actions and reactions of trillions of volts, setting the stage, explosions at an atomic level, shaking those mountains of electrons, and where the protons of sufficient size race through electrons attached to form a wormhole. That is functionally something like creating a result of a shock wave, which then becomes, at just the right levels of energy, either the escape of protons or the capture of protons, which then returns them that force of electrons stretched back into the Earth at speeds greater than light, thereby moving a large atomic particle through mass. Because there is mass, there is space in atomic structure. It confronts and possibly stops enough mass cutting loose electrons before exiting the Earth, thereby slowed down. However, because these wormholes are consistently created in the very same place, they will dig a hole through the Earth to come out the other side with sufficient energy to be returned by the mountain of electrons at beyond the speed of light, cutting mass like a saw. The extreme energy being released in these exercises are of soon-to-be horror. Once through the Earth is a resultant force back in the opposite direction, returning through the planet endlessly, trapped again and again as a mountain of electron magnetic effects. Now on both sides demand it shall be so, at speeds far beyond the speed of light, chainsawing time and planet, a reality caused by the removal of laws existing to protect physical boundaries of an action and reaction from such energies as is the basis of time itself. Or more simply, time is, we can depend upon this energy, creating a controlled, identifiable response. Speeds beyond the control of time, as is anything beyond light, have their own laws, and obey little or nothing in time. Continuing, the stage is set with a cloud of electrons set apart from the nucleus of atomic structure. Considerable loss to the surrounding environment. What remains is determined. Three things happen when a train wreck of protons above the energy levels that call time are caused to exist. The orbital reality of electrons is moved to chaos but still connected. the critical structure of a proton or neutron relationship is changed to become aggravated, relieved of disciplines called time. A separated environment establishes its own rules and laws. You cannot conceive of more unless you understand the atomic environment as a whole in time. It is as it is. The relationship is constructed by three separate things as well. One, the exploding mass that established a Big Bang. There is an outer jacket of material and inner core of material, and each of which will experience a different level of energy, because even instantaneous means the release of structure. Still requires a breakdown by force, more severe internally than externally. A black hole is created by energy being turned back into itself, requiring the only possible exit of a force too extreme to be denied, that it must turn onto itself and change its own description, becoming the opposite of what it was. That law, the law controlling, is for every reaction there will be an opposite equal reaction, as a formation that is called a black hole, commonly created through a supernova effect. In this particular case of a Big Bang, where all the mass of an entire universe is held together as one entity established by known realities of expansion and the effect of an explosion beyond comprehension, the reality of instantaneous presents us with the question: if there was no time to form the structure of a black hole, or where there were many black holes that created spin in each other to the point of disintegration, then what happened to the energy and mass forced to turn upon itself in an extreme chaos that was internal to this reality? The answer is what is called mass, antimass, and energy or anti-energy left the area together. Mass and energy in front, multiplied by pressures and temperatures beyond the rest, as is consistent with your thermonuclear designs. What is greater, anti-force and a level of traction coming quickly from behind to overtake all but the outer layer jacket. The effects of an explosion are that what is external, the outer skin, receives the least foundation effects, in this case becoming the electrons' pieces so broken up they lose their identity, not mass, but retain an existence. Force released, a whole established by energy, retaining no substance, later becoming a universal dust or haze. Deprived of an orbit, these divided into tiny particles pushed by explosive forces to extreme levels of energy. They do become proton materials, not protons, but materials for that formation. Second, in the middle effect, wherein larger pieces of composite material shaped and filled by the forces are exhibited or released and then bound together as mass and antimass, including a wide variety of very small pieces, for the existence of force defined as in retained by composition and boundaries of dimension. The foundation of electrons are formed here as well. Third are the internal components which have been altered to cause or become the explosion itself, thereby the most vulnerable and most subjected to extreme conditions. Can't get out immediately, must endure. We then take these conditions and examine nuclear composition today. In order to understand, in order for an environment to be nuclear and contain levels of energy sustained as is known to exist, there must be a force equal to, opposite of, and greater than the energy being contained. It is called gravity to some, but exists only by internal forces on individual atomic structures. That force holding energy and mass together can only be what is called antimatter or anti-energy. What is otherwise called a neutron is anti both forces and mass, which mimic or express what are in effect little tiny black holes improperly formed. Or more correctly, the effect of strings established by black holes, which does create the opposing forces to contain both electrons and protons. The proton being the force which becomes responsible for an environment, the building of mass. The neutron representing the balance applied by sustaining available mass within the environment itself until saturated. These effects described as positive energy or negative energy, anti-energy, so to speak. Counteraction of energy by an anti-energy is most correctly understood by levels of heat or movement and cold, stationary, do matter. Building of planets, etc., fundamentally requires mass by what is cold will attach to what is cold in a hot soup if it happens quickly. You can actually see this effect by simply frying frozen tater tots in hot oil. They're separate to start. They will clump together in hot oil and must be separated to fry correctly, just like planets. In an explosion that destroys all the mass of our universe instantaneously, the outer and middle compositions of what is left will contain the largest pieces of mass possible. Forming out of the explosions, these have the least physical effects because of distance and space are found to be varying shapes and sizes. The question is, what is cold or heat? The true forms of physical forms of energy in time and space, atomic dimensions, work on a different plane. The physical existence of force applied to it as an action will result in an opposite but equal reaction that is limited by heat or cold. The critical question, what is temperature? The illuminated answer is an action or reaction that is measured in time by the forces applied to it. That force being what is or is not done to the atomic environment when confronted with opposing dimensions that must shift to become integrated or at odds with the whole balance of the whole. More simply, the chemistry of time, the balance of failure to balance of the whole atomic environment. Cold is in balance and in a state of sustained cooperation, while heat is unbalanced, the direct denial of cooperation within the components. No rhythms match. Collisions result of a separated atomic environment. These rhythms of an orbiting field of energy and mass binding together or separating, either quickly or over time, construct the basis of time itself, a distinct definition or measurement that can be determined by the structure of what forces are involved. The elemental dimensions of atomic structure itself are those forces balanced by what is a real in this dimension as mass and energy applied by force but contained as a relationship in time, by what is not conceived of as real in this alternate dimension is as antimatter and anti-energy. The space in between matter and energy and its anti-opposite effect becomes a three-dimensional state. Polar opposites identify the creation of structure, an area or neutral zone between the two extremes which allows communication between these to become as one, with the result which is a space called time. These elements of time, which include and become the primary foundations of dimension, the experience translated between what is real and what is not real, as can be measured or assembled, these communicate with truth as determined by the laws which visit and form the dimension itself or reality. Visited by the expression called thought forms, a fundamental thought is a living experience. As extreme energy is in the critical existence of all that nuclei that have been elementally separated, forced to extreme distances from their electrons by the reality of force being used, called electricity, the crash of force being applied at CERN, the proton becomes an atomic anchor shaken loose from time. Better understood as the relationship between the atomic elements, proton, neutron, and electron, are governed by rotation. Once that rotation becomes disconnected from the reality of its own rhythms, which does help sustain it as an independent atomic environment, these energies or laws associated with the environment are changed as well. The result is a proton-neutron mass that does not remain stable. It shakes due to electron effects in a less symmetrical or organized orbit. The result is a mass that works like a chainsaw or sledgehammer on common balanced atomic structure surrounded. This is the next secondary effect. How a wormhole is made. Humans have now made extreme energy as the basis of a kinetic existence outside the speed limits of light within an environment that does not allow an action therefrom beyond time to be contained by the laws of time itself. As a consequence, nothing exists, no reaction to stop it from sustaining itself, much like an electron sustains itself in a nuclear environment. The rules are much the same, but the potential effects are distinctly different due to the size of the particles being allowed and the range of the motion. Separated from its disciplines by nuclear laws, this superweapon is now free. The question is, what can a proton or energy deposit of a nuclear environment do here? More importantly, can the proton, now accelerated beyond the limit of anything being able to react to its existence, continue on without interference with anything? Will it not heat up? Can it explode? Without the element of heat being used, it is freed forever, and what are the limits, if any? Critical to the elemental study of what is possible is the transfer of heat from the proton to the environment of cold. Without an electron shield for balance, the question becomes exactly what does the excited electrons already in this cold do with an alternate nucleus that now mimics an electron freed but is not? There are only two feasible choices. Either they tag along for the ride, or they interfere with the passage of this proton, thereby heating it up. If then it is true that the proton has nothing that can react to its presence, the potential absence of heat, no energy loss, it would also be true that electrons in orbit around that atomic nucleus can react to its presence. But if it is true that the freed proton represents a stronger draw to the electron than it does to the parent nucleus, then surely that electron will gravitate to the greater draw, unbalancing the atomic nucleus resting in time. The question becomes, does a superproton have greater or similar speed than an electron, in which case the proton organizes a march essentially of an army of electrons as it proceeds, pulling apart any organized orbit to reshape time into a wormhole. Basically looks like an upside down mountain of electron energy, something like a shockwave. The question of an orbit is abandoned, replaced by a magnetic ascension. The balance of power is shifted within a similar situation as is planets and sun due to gravity. The larger force draws a smaller force, even though the distance in space can be great. Unlike the sun and planets, there is no discipline of action because there is no consequence called reaction to create time, a measurable effect. These electrons simply gang up like a swarm of insects or such, anchored to each other and the force that pulls them. The question remains, are the electrons released completely random, or is there an influence that remains to establish some aspect of order, as is the alternate law in nuclear beyond time physics? In every gravitational solar system galaxy, there is a black hole at the center within which a planetary system resides in effective order. In this scenario, there will be no black hole created by the effects of pushing proton particles past the edge of time. However, the influences illustrate of a supernova collapse that leads to a black hole will be realized. Or more simply, in a supernova, when the atomic energy is exhausted to the point all previous order fails, there will be a reaction equal to the action that preceded it. Or in this case, as is the design of solar systems, the disk of influence will be defined. Because the explosion has a distinct direction and a functionally parallel dimension or definition to that direction, the debris will flow. Mass cannot keep up with the forces of energy ejected, therefore they will spin to the side. The effect of creating a wormhole, which is nothing more than an opportunity for electrons to collect and transition from a balanced atomic environment into an army, is fundamentally to pushing an accelerated proton past the limits and disciplines of real energy and time. The proton either leaves or is returned. Size matters in this case. Once past the disk created by gravitational influence, it has left to enter the alternate dimensions. The failure to leave constitutes the consequence of what a wormhole can do. Like a cord attached by electrons, the proton hangs on to this dimension because the thread of influence is time itself, or the reality of balanced atomic environments which are disrupted and turned into an alternate purpose. Therefore, it constantly emerges with a wormhole. It cannot leave and must either surrender energy or return again and again forever through the parent of its electron force, such as the Earth. Time is a constant, emerges as thought not discussed, but time past the constant of energy, where no reaction can exist, conceives of things that cannot be measured because they do not exist with speeds so extreme there is no reaction possible to that speed, in essence, then eternal. Critical to the end result of energy is how does the thread of existence retain its identity? Or once it has formed to be eternal, it does have identifiable traits that will always be true. As energy, the critical existence of all those nuclei that have been abandoned by their electrons becomes an anchor. More and more are involved, until the resultant changes in balance affect the entire mass, making it vulnerable to the explosive effects that recognize chaos. The elemental troop of an explosion then becomes a line which is attached to an endless action that returns and returns and returns at unimaginable speed, slicing and dicing the reality of time itself, as displayed in our reality, this Earth. This effect changing its balanced atomic nuclei to become completely unstable mass, as a superproton proceeds through this Earth to wreck every anchor that exists to control our reality. Repeated, that terrorists that CERN, the particle accelerator buried in a mountain, are reviewed. Their stated purpose: to recreate and study the energies responsible for the Big Bang and bring them here, the single most destructive event in the history of the universe. A gamble with this entire planet that is complex but understandable if you try. We examine from the Exhibit S that insane men also demand that they are not only correct in their interpretations of geology, thereby the record called Noah's flood doesn't exist to them, to their peril, because the evidence is real, absolutely irrefutable, and without question that did occur. The reality of fossil fuels proves a global flood did occur, because there's absolutely no other way for these now resources to exist as they are. They could not by any other means, and buried in piles together under hundreds or thousands of feet of earth, fully knowing that all fossil fuel is in reality buried alive together. That is our reality by its truth. So then we come to the Eli project, under construction currently, which promises, quote, the first 3 lasers will operate at 1,000,000 times more powerful than 10 billion 100-watt light bulbs. Touch a 100-watt light bulb for a sense of reality. It is a 1 with 18 zeros watts of power per laser. They're building 3 lasers with a combined energy release, once they're triangulated, of 1 with 52 zeros. Scientists say the total energy received from the sun on Earth is equivalent to about 232 with 12 zeros. Horsepower multiplied by, well, anyway. Concentrated into a pencil beam, the Eli or exawatt laser is more powerful than the sun established on this whole Earth, will be focused in one tiny location for a few billionths of a second. Can't be done. National Ignition Facility exists. Are they lying? They store energy, electrical energy, and then release it. You do believe anything they say, don't you? The President does. Every media outlet does, as that is why no coal-fired power plants are being built. They intend to have a new fire to use. And not one court in the state or nation will allow the people, we the people, to be informed of this gamble so they can play God. Even a fourth laser with beams twice the power of these three is being created. Or more simply, while the abomination called National Ignition Facility might fail or succeed in the next few weeks, creating out is sunfire, not fusion, but sunfire. By 2015, there will be another set of lasers that promises 6 times more energy than the National Ignition Facility, concentrated into one spot by 3 individual lasers, all triangulated into a combined force of 3 million of the largest lightning bolts possible, all hitting the same place at the same time to ignite sunfire on Earth. No going back. It's true. This is linked at www.trialoflife.info.